Maya Rivers felt her world collapse. It shattered into a million sharp pieces. Her younger sister Allie was gone, vanished from life so suddenly, so brutally.
Grief became Maya's shadow, a constant suffocating presence. It was a heavy cloak she could not remove, day or night. Sleep offered no solace, only a landscape of recurring nightmares, replaying the moment she heard the news. Waking hours were a torment, a dull, persistent ache deep within her chest, a raw wound that wept silently, refusing any comfort or healing.
The vibrant colors of her world had faded to gray. All sounds seemed distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. Ali. Her name was a whisper on Maya's lips, a name that once sang with life. Ali had been her confidant, her other half, the brighter star in their small constellation. Her laughter, a melody Maya now strained to recall, was replaced by an echoing silence. A profound, unbearable emptiness filled every room, every thought.
Maya found herself replaying their last conversation. A trivial disagreement over something forgotten. Foolish, angry words. Words she now desperately wished she could snatch back from the air. Regret, sharp and relentless, was a vulture tearing at her insides. The sheer injustice of it all. Why Ali? Why her vibrant, hopeful sister?
The city became a prison of memories. Every street corner, every familiar cafe, every park bench screamed Ali's absence. Friends tried to reach her, their voices soft with sympathy. Their words were kind, meant to soothe, but they bounced off Maya's impenetrable wall of sorrow. They couldn't possibly understand the depth of this chasm. They hadn't lost the person who knew their soul.
Maya knew she had to escape. She needed to flee the pitying glances, the hushed, sympathetic tones that felt like sandpaper on her exposed nerves. She yearned for an escape, for a place where her grief could be raw and untamed. A cabin, deep in the woods, secluded, far from the suffocating reminders. It appeared in an online search, almost beckoning her. It felt like the only answer, the only path forward, or perhaps the only way to stop moving altogether.
A place to be utterly alone with my crushing sadness. A place where no one would expect me to be strong, to feign a smile, to pretend I was coping. I imagined the profound quiet, the whispering wind through the trees, the comforting indifference of nature. Perhaps there, cocooned in solitude, I could finally confront the storm within me, or simply let it consume me completely.
The drive was long, miles of asphalt unspooled behind her. Each mile put more distance between Maya and her old life, between Maya and the place where Ali had lived. The trees grew denser. The road narrowed. Civilization receded like a fading dream. Finally, a dirt track, bumpy, overgrown. It led her deeper into the woods, deeper into the silence she craved, or so she thought.
The cabin, when it finally emerged from the thicket of trees, was older than I expected, more isolated. Its wooden walls were weathered, stained dark by years of rain and snow. Windows like vacant eyes stared out from beneath a moss-covered roof. An unsettling quiet hung in the air, not peaceful but expectant, as if the forest itself was holding its breath.
Maya stepped out of the car. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. A shiver traced its way down her spine, not entirely from the cold. The cabin exuded an aura, a feeling. It wasn't welcoming, it felt watchful, waiting. She clutched her keys tightly. This was it, her refuge, her escape. But a small, insistent voice, almost too faint to hear, whispered a warning in the back of her mind. A warning she chose to ignore, attributing it to her frayed nerves and exhaustion.
Inside, the cabin was rustic, sparsely furnished. A thick layer of dust coated every surface. Cobwebs draped the corners like macabre decorations. The air was heavy, stale, as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold and empty. A threadbare rug lay before it, a sagging armchair, a small utilitarian kitchen. It was exactly what I had sought, a place devoid of comfort, devoid of reminders of a life that felt so distant now.
Yet standing in the dim light filtering through a grimy window, Maya felt a profound sense of unease settle over her, heavier than the grief itself. She told herself it was just the isolation, the sudden shift from city noise to profound wilderness. She was tired, vulnerable. Her imagination was playing tricks. That had to be it. She needed to be strong. She had come here to heal, or at least to find a quiet place to mourn without interruption.
I would clean. I would unpack. I would make this temporary shelter my own. But as I moved through the silent rooms, the feeling of being watched intensified. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, to lengthen, to writhe just beyond the periphery of my vision. This cabin held secrets. I could feel it.
The real estate agent had been an odd man, Mr. Hemlock, tall and gaunt. His eyes, pale and watery, never quite met hers. He had rushed through the showing, his voice a low monotone. He seemed eager to leave, as if the cabin itself made him uncomfortable. He had pointed out the basic amenities with a detached air, the leaky faucet in the kitchen, the temperamental generator, the distinct lack of phone signal or internet access.
Perfect for getting away from it all, he'd said, a strange little smile twitching at the corner of his thin lips. A smile that didn't reach his unsettling eyes.
Maya remembered his final words. They echoed in her mind now with a new, sinister resonance. As he handed her the rusty old keys, he had paused. His gaze flickered towards a narrow, unassuming door tucked away in a shadowy corner of the main room.
Everything is at your disposal, Miss Rivers, he'd stated, his voice dropping even lower. Except for the basement. The owner prefers it remains undisturbed, locked. Best to just leave it be.
He hadn't elaborated. He hadn't offered a reason. Just a stark, simple instruction, a warning perhaps, disguised as a request from an unseen owner. At the time, Maya hadn't given it much thought. A locked basement, in an old cabin, probably full of damp storage, spiders and forgotten junk. She had her own heavy baggage to deal with. The contents of a dusty cellar were the least of her concerns. She had nodded distractedly, eager to get the keys and for him to leave her to her solitude and her sorrow.
But now, standing in the oppressive silence of the cabin, his words replayed, "Best to just leave it be." There was an emphasis I hadn't registered before, a subtle weight, a hint of something unspoken. Why such a specific instruction? Why the owner's preference for it to remain locked and undisturbed? It wasn't a utility space, he hadn't mentioned anything practical. Merely leave it be. The door itself was unremarkable. Plain wood, darkened with age, a simple, old-fashioned latch currently unsecured, no obvious padlock. He had said locked, but it wasn't. Or had he simply meant don't go in? The ambiguity gnawed at me. A tiny seed of curiosity, unwelcome yet persistent, began to sprout amidst the weeds of my grief and growing unease. The basement. Suddenly, it felt less like a storage space and more like a secret.
The first night was the hardest. Sleep was a distant shore she couldn't reach. Every creak of the old cabin's timbers sounded like a footstep. Every rustle of leaves outside the window seemed like a whisper. Maya lay rigid in the unfamiliar bed, the thin blankets pulled up to her chin. The silence of the woods was not peaceful. It was alive, teeming with unseen things, with sounds her city ears struggled to decipher. Was that the wind or something else? Something trying to speak just beyond the edge of hearing. She told herself it was grief, exhaustion, an overactive imagination fueled by isolation.
Then I heard it. My name, Maya, a faint whisper. So soft I almost missed it. It seemed to come from nowhere, and everywhere. From the walls, from the floorboards, from the very air around me. I sat bolt upright in bed, my heart hammered against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling, instantly swallowed by the oppressive stillness of the room.
Silence answered her. A heavy, knowing silence. Had she imagined it? Dreamt it? It felt so real, too real. She strained her ears, listening intently, but there was nothing more. only the relentless thumping of her own pulse.
The next day, strange little things started to happen. Small disturbances, easily dismissed. At first, a book I was certain I'd left on the small table by the armchair was now on the mantelpiece above the cold fireplace. I frowned. Had I moved it? I couldn't recall. My memory felt foggy these days, unreliable. Later, while trying to light a fire, the matches stubbornly refused to strike. When I finally got one to catch, a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind from within the sealed cabin extinguished the tiny flame. It felt deliberate, malicious even.
These occurrences were unsettling. They pricked at her already frayed nerves. She tried to rationalize them. The cabin was old, drafty, she was forgetful, stressed. But a cold knot of fear began to tighten in her stomach.
The whispers, though, were the worst. They came intermittently. Always my name, Maya. Sometimes a mere breath, sometimes a sibilant hiss. Each time they sent a fresh jolt of terror through me. I started to jump at every sound. The cabin, my intended refuge, was beginning to feel like a cage, and I was not alone in it. The woods outside seemed to press in, watching, waiting. The whispers. They grew bolder, more frequent. No longer were they faint, questioning sounds on the edge of hearing. Now they were clearer, more insistent.
The voice, or voices, seemed to swirl around her, a chorus of unseen entities. They were in the rustle of the curtains when there was no breeze, in the creak of the floorboards overhead when she was certain she was the only one in the cabin, in the very sigh of the wind as it pressed against the old wooden structure. It was as if the cabin itself was trying to speak to her, to draw her attention to something she couldn't yet comprehend.
Objects didn't just move slightly anymore. They shifted with more purpose.
One morning she found her small framed photograph of Allie, the one she kept on the bedside table, lying face down on the floor. The glass was cracked. A cold dread washed over Maya. It felt like a violation. A direct message. She picked it up, her hands shaking. There was no logical explanation. No earthquake, no heavy vibrations, just the silent, malevolent presence that seemed to permeate every inch of Whisper Cabin.
I felt a growing sense of panic, a desperate urge to flee, but something held me rooted to the spot.
Cold spots began to appear randomly, suddenly. She would be standing in the small kitchen and an icy chill would envelop her, raising goosebumps on her arms despite the stuffy air. Then, just as quickly, it would vanish. These pockets of unnatural cold followed her, appearing and disappearing without warning. They often coincided with the whispers, as if the entity drawing warmth from the air to manifest its voice.
I started wearing my thickest sweater constantly, but the chill was more than physical. It seeped into my bones, into my very soul, a premonition of something terrible.
The feeling of being watched was now a certainty. It was no longer a vague unease. It was a palpable pressure on her skin, the prickling sensation of unseen eyes boring into her back. She would spin around expecting to see someone, something standing there, but there was never anything, only the empty room, the dusty furniture, the shadows that danced and stretched with a life of their own.
Sleep became impossible. I would lie awake for hours, listening, my senses heightened, every nerve ending screaming.
The cabin was alive, and it was aware of her. It wanted something from her.
One afternoon, as sunlight struggled to penetrate the grimy kitchen window, I noticed them. Scratch marks. On the inside of the back door. Not animal scratches. These were different, deeper, more desperate, like fingernails had clawed at the wood, frantically, trying to get out, or perhaps trying to get in deeper.
A shiver of pure ice traced its way down Maya's spine. She ran her trembling fingers over the gouges. They were old, but the desperation they conveyed felt fresh, immediate.
Who had made these marks, and why?
The discovery added another layer to the oppressive dread that had become her constant companion. Later that day, she caught a glimpse of something in the dusty hallway mirror. A fleeting movement, a flash of colour. She turned quickly, her heart leaping into her throat. Nothing, just her own pale, haunted reflection staring back. But for a split second she could have sworn she saw Ali, just for an instant. Ali's blue sweater, the way her hair fell. It was impossible. Ali was gone. This cabin, this grief, it was making her see things. Hallucinations. That's what they were. She clung to that rational explanation, even as a colder, more terrifying possibility began to take root in her mind.
The basement door. Mr. Hemlock's warning echoed again. Best to just leave it be.
She had avoided it, consciously pushed it to the back of her thoughts, but now her gaze was drawn to it constantly. It was still unlatched, as she had first noticed, but today it was different. It was slightly ajar. Just a crack. A sliver of profound darkness visible in the gap. Had it been like that before? She was certain it had been closed. Had the settling of the old cabin shifted it, or had something else opened it? Something from the other side? The air around the door felt colder, heavier. A morbid curiosity mingled with a terrifying sense of inevitability began to pull at Maya. The whispers seemed to emanate from that direction now, fainter yet more enticing. Were they real? Or was her mind fracturing under the strain? She felt a strange compulsion, a pull towards that sliver of darkness. As if the answers to Ali's presence, to the cabin's secrets, lay beyond that closed-off space. The rational part of her screamed to run, to get out of the cabin, to never look back. But another part, a part twisted by grief and a desperate, illogical hope, wanted to know more, wanted to understand. The decision wasn't conscious. It was a surrender, a yielding to the invisible currents that had been pulling her since she arrived. Maya found herself standing before the basement door. The narrow gap beckoned, a dark maw promising either answers or oblivion. The whispers were more insistent now, coiling around her like spectral tendrils. Her sister's name. That was the lure, the hook. Could it be? Could Ali somehow be connected to this place? Grief, in its desperation, can make one believe the impossible. Hope, however irrational, flickered within her. Her hand trembled as she reached for the cool metal of the latch. It felt heavy, as if resisting her touch. Or perhaps it was the weight of her own fear. She pushed the door inward. It creaked open slowly, reluctantly, groaning like a creature in pain. A gust of stale, earthy air billowed out, carrying the scent of damp soil, decay and something else, something cloyingly sweet and ancient. The darkness beyond was absolute, a stark contrast to the dim light of the cabin's main room. It was a void that seemed to swallow light, to swallow sound, to swallow hope itself. A set of steep, rickety wooden stairs descended into the blackness. Each step looked treacherous, coated in years of dust and what might have been mildew. Maya hesitated at the threshold. Every instinct screamed at her to slam the door shut, to barricade it, to flee this accursed place. But the whispers, Ali's name, they held her captive.
She fumbled for her phone, switching on its weak flashlight. The beam cut a narrow, trembling path into the oppressive gloom, revealing only the first few steps and then nothing but more darkness.
Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she placed her foot on the first step. The wood groaned ominously beneath her weight. Each subsequent step was a small act of courage, or perhaps profound foolishness. The air grew colder, damper with every footfall. The silence down here was different, thicker, as if the very sound waves were absorbed by the earthen walls. The flashlight beam danced nervously, illuminating patches of rough-hewn stone, cobwebs as thick as shrouds, and the unsettling feeling of countless unseen eyes watching her progress. Down, down she went, into the heart of Whisper Cabin's secret, into the place Mr. Hemlock had warned her to avoid. She was no longer just grieving. She was now a participant in the cabin's chilling narrative. The flashlight beam finally found the floor. Dirt, packed earth. The basement was small, confined. The ceiling was low, making Maya feel like the weight of the entire cabin was pressing down on her. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and something else, something indefinably old and sorrowful. As her eyes adjusted, the beam fell upon the walls. They were covered in drawings, childlike scrawls, stick figures with wide staring eyes and gaping mouths, crude depictions of a cabin, of trees, and of shadowy figures. Many shadowy figures. They seemed to writhe on the stone, animated by the flickering light. In the center of the small, oppressive room stood a single object, an old wooden chair, simple, austere. Its wood was dark, almost black, and worn smooth in places as if from long use. It faced away from the stairs towards the far wall, towards a section of the wall that was darker, more densely covered in the disturbing primitive drawings. The whispers intensified around her, no longer just her name, but a cacophony of soft, sighing voices, swirling like a vortex. The words chilled Maya to the bone. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a prison. A cold dread far deeper than any she had felt before seized her.
"Who are you?" she choked out, her voice barely a whisper itself. "What do you want?"
The flashlight beam trembled violently in her hand. Then a figure began to coalesce near the chair. It shimmered into existence, translucent, ethereal. Maya gasped, her breath catching in her throat. It was Ali, her sister, looking just as she had in life, yet not. Her eyes were hollow, filled with an ancient sadness. A faint, sorrowful smile touched her lips.
Her sister's voice echoed, not from her lips but inside Maya's head, mingled with the other whispers.
"Ali, is it really you?" Tears streamed down Maya's face, a mixture of terror and a desperate, impossible hope.
Ali's voice whispered, full of regret.
Understanding, cold and horrifying, dawned on Maya. The whispers, the cabin, the need for someone to stay.
Ali continued, her form flickering.
The truth was a brutal blow. Ali hadn't come to comfort her. The new tenant hummed softly as she unlocked the cabin door. Her name was Clara. She was an artist, seeking inspiration in the solitude of the woods. The real estate agent, a strange, gaunt man named Mr. Hemlock, had been eager to rent it out quickly.
A previous tenant left unexpectedly, he'd explained vaguely, not meeting her eyes.
Clara didn't mind. The price was right. The location, perfectly secluded. She breathed in the crisp forest air, a smile playing on her lips. This was just what she needed. A fresh start, a quiet place to create. She stepped inside, her boots echoing slightly in the stillness. The cabin was rustic, a little dusty, but it had a certain charm. She ran a hand over the worn wooden table. Yes, this would do nicely. She noticed the faint scent of pine and something else. Something faintly sweet, almost floral. Odd, but not unpleasant. She made a mental note to air the place out thoroughly. Her gaze fell upon a narrow door in the corner. The basement, Mr. Hemlock had said.
Best to leave it be, he'd advised. Owner's preference.
Clara shrugged. She had no interest in dusty basements. She was here for the light, the trees, the inspiration above ground. As she moved towards the window, intending to throw it open and let in the fresh air, she caught a movement in the periphery. She paused. Turning, she glanced at the small dusty mirror hanging on the wall near the entrance. For a fleeting moment she thought she saw another woman standing just behind her reflection. A woman with wide, terrified eyes. A woman who looked pale, almost translucent. Clara blinked, and the image was gone. Just her own reflection stared back, slightly surprised.
"Must be tired from the drive," she murmured to herself, shaking her head. "Imagination."
But as Clara turned away from the mirror, a faint whisper seemed to brush against her ear. So soft, she almost dismissed it as the wind. Her name? She frowned, looking around the empty cabin.
"Hello," she called out.
Only silence answered. A deep, expectant silence. Unseen, Unheard by the new tenant, Maya's ethereal form pressed against the cold glass of the mirror, her silent scream trapped within. Her eyes, wide with an eternity of horror, watched as Clara began to unpack. The whispers had a new name to call. The cabin had a new soul to claim, and Maya was now part of the chorus, forever.